Hello, I'm Zoe Davies and welcome to Thanet Writers Investigate Healthy Writing Practices. As writers constantly immersing ourselves into our stories, we run the risk of our characters' emotions becoming our own. This can have a negative effect on our daily lives if we can't find a way to switch off when we put the pen down. Today I have come to speak to author and editor Madeline Wright to find out how she manages to separate her writing from everyday life, and any tips that she may have for writers doing the same. Thank you for speaking to us today. Could you please tell us a little bit about your writing?
Well, thanks for asking me to speak to you today. Fundamentally, I am a journalist and a marketeer, and I've come to believe that the power of words has the ability to be a Rosetta Stone that connects people. So fundamentally, because of my background in marketing and magazine publishing, I have created frameworks through the web and through magazines that allow people to come together. So those are the kind of writing opportunities I have taken advantage of, and I also create writing opportunities for people through things like Write On magazine, which is a pen-to-print Arts Council funded magazine by the market and for the market, offering emerging writers an opportunity. Nina Iraq magazine, which connected the Iraqi diaspora to women in country to help them understand what they could achieve if they had the opportunities. And also young people, you might remember I created a magazine called Oi, which was for young people across Kent. It was born in the Marlowe Academy and then it went national. So I am a passionate advocate of co-creation, and I use that to promote opportunities and connect different market sectors together and give people who don't necessarily have a voice.
Well, that's very interesting. You mentioned previously that you've written a book. Could you tell us about that briefly, please?
Yeah, Mother of Floods is a book I wrote in 2017. I gave myself a year to do it, which was quite stressful in terms of timing. Fundamentally, it's set in our now, so where economic chaos and lack of resources and political and social problems reign, and it, with a sentient internet at its heart, it connects women from across the world who have the courage to press the reset button in their lives. And so in the age of the downfall, which I see as being now, it creates a hopeful future by connecting people and digital and spiritual identities together, and hopefully finding a new way of being and working towards a new future.
Well, that sounds lovely. You must have had to get quite in depth with a lot of your characters. How did you find that you were able to separate your characters from your everyday life?
Well, a good question. I think obviously I've done a lot of work in international development, and so some of the stories I saw were very powerful stories in their own right, and I think every writer always brings a little bit of themselves into the characters, but fundamentally, because they were such different, from Beatrice Mukumbe, who I met in Zimbabwe, to people like Lemia and Sira, who I met in Iraq, they're all very different stories. And so I suppose for me, one of the really important things was it wasn't as much that the stories were coming alive and trying to make them happen. It was a way of connecting and combining those stories into a framework that makes sense. And that was what was challenging and linked to the kind of different identities, the spiritual and the physical and the emotional identities. And that was challenging. And actually I remember, when it's just you and your computer, it's really hard to kind of find the headspace to see the big picture when you're constantly looking inwards to write. And I suppose for me, one of the really important ways of doing that was actually Lucy Horse, who came into my life just before I started writing the book and was actually really instrumental in making that happen.
So how does Lucy Horse help you? How does she get you out of work focus into Madeline mind, shall we say?
I think one of the really important things, I actually see her as a gift that moved me from someone, I suppose, I won't say a transactional writer, but someone who believed that, you know, you had to make money when you were writing, and I still do. You have to make money when you're writing, you know, and, you know, journalistically and editing, that's a really important side of things. But I think there's also a very important creative edge, and what I've come to realise is that the poetry that I've always written, that I always wrote with no expectation of making any money, that's kind of become much more important. And Lucy Horse, because of an accident I had, just completely changed my perspective in terms of the kind of writing I wanted to do and the direction I wanted my life to take, and that came through a riding accident. So that real belief that her coming into my life was part of what was propelling me into a new direction, that was really important, because writing takes courage more than anything. And the physical courage that I need to ride Lucy, you know, and get back on her again after an accident is a really important thing. So that mental and physical courage, interlinking that, is a really important thing. The joy of riding in itself, you know, just watching the seasons. You know, I ride in St Nicholas at Wade, and I sometimes ride all the way down to Minas Bay. And you don't see the seasons in the day-to-day life that we lead, you know, but actually riding through the countryside and seeing the different fields, seeing the different, you know, the different, you know, the different, noticing they planted sunflowers, for example, this time, and linseed, you know, the purple and yellow fields. You see things in a different way from horseback, and actually connecting to the land, connecting in a very different way to the countryside around you, is a really important part of the kind of riding experience. So seeing things in a different way helps connect to the writing experience.
Lucy Horse obviously is an excellent way for you to relax and clear your mind so that you're ready for writing the next day. What sort of tips would you give to other writers that are struggling to find ways to relax? Obviously it's very individual, but is there a general tip that you could give to help people find their way to relax?
I think we've got to, as writers, we live in our heads, and by default we have to live in our heads. But we also need to connect to the physical world around us. And as I say, I think that courage is a really important thing. But I think in terms of general relaxation, find something that engages you physically. Find something that engages you emotionally, that takes you out of the fantasy world you've created and puts you back in the real world, because that will help you with your writing as well. So for me, for example, in Mother of Floods, I have a character, a horse called Dennis. Okay, so Dennis is very much based on Lucy Horse, and yet Dennis actually moves from the real of the field into, you know, kind of supernatural elements and the kind of fantasy dystopian elements that I brought into my book. And so I actually think by hooking into different parts of yourself and using, you know, say running is another thing I love doing, so that physical work. For me, faith is a really important side of things, the spiritual side of things is a really important way of relaxing. Meditation. And if you're really, really lucky, you find an activity like riding that actually brings those things together. But I think it's about connecting yourself to the world around you and to things that matter in a completely different way, and having the courage to do that. And I think that's at the heart of good writing.
That has been very interesting today. Thank you so much for speaking to us. As you can see, finding a way to relax is a very important skill for any writer to learn. On behalf of Thanet Writers, thank you for watching.